We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Welcome back to Liberty Nation Radio. We're here with Tim Donner, longtime host of this here radio show and Liberty Nation senior political analyst. Earlier in the show, we were talking the coronation of Kamala Harris. But now, Tim, I'd like to talk about some lessons that perhaps Miss Harris could learn from overseas. Now, you and I have discussed this quite in depth, I think, but there's something very tangible, a very tangible lesson that can be learned from the July 4th destruction of the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom. And for those who don't know, if I just give the brief background, then you can weigh in on it, Tim. On the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who was Prime Minister, when he came to power through an internal party election. What should have happened, because in Britain they choose the party, not the candidate. What should have happened was the members of Parliament would have had a vote, the Conservative members of Parliament would have had a vote to determine which two candidates can go forth and campaign among Conservative Party members across the country. But that didn't happen. There was a rule change. And so one of the other top contenders pulled out just a couple of minutes prior to the end. And so Rishi Sunak was installed as Prime Minister without a single person outside of Parliament voting for him.
The key word in that sentence is installed.
Very much so. Yeah.
And that's just the same thing with Kamala Harris, of course.
And then fast forward to the very first election challenge that Rishi Sunak has, which was July 4th, Independence Day, this year. This is the first time he's election. So he's been in office as Prime Minister for more than a year and a half. And the Conservative Party suffered the worst defeat they've ever had. It essentially wiped them down to a minor party status. And a big reason for that is because Rishi Sunak was never, as the Conservative Party member said, he was never chosen by them. They were not Team Rishi. They didn't have the choice to vote for Rishi Sunak. And now I'm wondering, Tim, if Kamala Harris might not take heed of that, because yes, she's now the Democratic Party nominee for president in November, but not a single person in America voted for her, other than the delegates who were already essentially bound by voting for Joe Biden in the primary.
Well, look, I think what we saw with Rishi Sunak in the UK was a man who was in way over his head. He just wasn't up to the job. And that's the danger of having a selection rather than election. When someone is selected by party elites because they evidently know better than the voters what they should have, this is the kind of thing that happened, that can happen, that did happen in the UK, and that certainly can happen here. I would rewind to about, let's just say, a year ago, before Joe Biden's cognitive deficiencies were unmasked to the degree that they were in that infamous debate. At that point, how many Democrats would have said, let's just go with Kamala. She's a better bet than Biden. Or would they have said, let's open up the process. Let's see what Gavin Newsom has to offer. This guy, Andy Bashir, is a Democrat in a deep red state, Kentucky, and he's popular. What about him? What about Gretchen Whitmer, an attractive, well-spoken candidate? Do you think if this process was open, that Kamala Harris would have prevailed? And I think the answer to that came in 2020, when her much ballyhooed candidacy came roaring out of the gate with a ton of contributions, big funding, and then she puts herself on the map by calling Joe Biden essentially a racist in the first debate. And that was the height of her candidacy, because she face planted after that, never even made it to the starting line. So I think we can see how she does in a competitive race. Now, all the people saying she's a different person, now she's grown in the office. Well, if she's grown in the office, then her record as border czar defies that description. She has a lot of splaining to do with.
So, Tim, you've got this situation where Kamala Harris was weighed, measured, and found wanting in 2020. She couldn't win a single delegate. She got humiliated during debate performances by both Tulsi Gabbard, who essentially quoted her own record back at her, by even Joe Biden, who was a little bit sharper then than he is now, but accused her of ignoring issues with segregated schools in California, despite being asked to deal with that segregation issue. And now she's expected to appear on the national stage with, as you point out, a very poor record to run on. And all she really has is the hope that there are more people who don't want Donald Trump back for a further 4 years than who want. But she may have also just been shackled with a plan by Joe Biden that could prove quite disastrous. And we'll be back to talk about that after this short break.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.